Pulse of the Pack podcast. Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or nonprofit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If the Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Hey, what's up, Green Bay? We are back and better than ever. This is Pulse of the Pack, brought to you by Mayfield Sports Marketing and Waukesha Sports Cards. Mayfield Marketing will have Richard Rodgers this Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. and Ty Montgomery Saturday, October 17th from 4 to 5 p.m. And on October 29th, Mayfield and our other sponsor that I mentioned, Waukesha Sports Cards, will have former Packers safety Nick Collins from 6 to 7 at Waukesha Sports. Now that we got the announcements out of the way, I am Jacob Westendorf. It is Victory Sunday night. Once again, the Green Bay Packers are 5-0. After beating the St. Louis Rams at home today. Joined with me as always, and I am giddy, and I'm sure he is as well, is Jason Perrone. Jason, how you doing?
I am fantastic. I want to mention that the Rodgers and the Montgomery signings are at D2 Sports Pub. Jacob, I might need some help from you on that one. I've been to Green Bay now several times over the past couple of years, but I'm not too familiar with D2. I'm assuming that is a pretty cool venue if that's where the players are going to be signing. And then, like you said, Nick Collins will actually be at Waukesha Sports Card, so we appreciate their help. Have you been to D2 before?
I have, just once, though, and it was very brief, and I was, what's the right word, inebriated, so I don't remember much of it. But I'm sure it's a great venue. I'm going to actually try to get there for the Ty Montgomery signing on Saturday with it being Throwback weekend, so I hope to see some of you there. But let's go to the game now. Packers won 24-10. And again, we will not be starting this show with your proverbial Aaron Rodgers is amazing segment because he was pretty pedestrian today. The world stopped spinning. The sky turned green. Grass turned black, whatever way you want to look at it. But Aaron Rodgers threw an interception at home. The first one, kind of a fluky play off a tipped pass by James Laurinaitis. The second one, they sat on a route, and it was jumped. That was a legitimate interception, and he lost a fumble as well. Any concern about the offense's sluggish overall play? I mean, Rodgers wasn't the best player on the field today, and that's something you can almost always count on.
No, I mean, no, I'm not concerned. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has an off day, and today was really an off day. There's no cold fingers about it. He didn't play very well. And as much as we want to protect him because he's the franchise and at the end of it all, he gives us more chances to win than not. He didn't play very well today. We have to give credit, though. I don't want to sound, disingenuous towards the St. Louis Rams defense. Their defenses, we knew they were good coming in, and that defensive front proved to be everything that we thought it was throughout the day. They were in Rodgers' space. They were a great challenge for the Packers' offensive line, although I think the offensive line held their own pretty well against one of the best defensive lines and fronts in all of football. So, the offense, I think, will come around, and we're going to talk about this next matchup, and I have a feeling that this next game is one where the offense might be able to get itself clicking and get a little what we like to call healthy as the Packers head into the bye week. But healthy, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, number 12 is on 2 feet, and he's good to go, Jacob, I don't think we have anything to worry about. Do you?
No, I don't. And, this is going to happen. It happens every year. It just hadn't happened at home in such a long time that I think that locally, you kind of forget that Aaron Rodgers is human. He was human today. There were some throws that he had that he missed. There were some decisions. He was indecisive at times. But credit that Rams defense. That Rams defense is very good, and it's not just the defensive line that's very good. They are fast in the secondary. The officials were letting them play a little bit in the secondary, which is kind of the way I like it anyways, because it plays in the Packers' favor as well that way. But overall, you mentioned 2 sacks, only 5 yards lost for the offensive line against a very good defensive front. Brian Bulaga looked okay his first time back. TJ Lang out with an injury. We'll see how that goes. He tweeted, "I'll be fine." But that could mean that he's just not getting his leg amputated, as you astutely pointed out after the game was over. One thing that is concerning to me about the offense, I was up high in the stadium today. And one thing that I saw, and I'm sure a lot of other people did as well, is the receivers are not creating any separation. And the Rams were sitting on short routes, and the Packers were unable to get away from them. And this is where the loss of Jordy Nelson for the season and the extended period of time that Devontae Adams is missing is starting to show up a little bit. The Packers they have some limited players. Ty Montgomery is a young guy. He's a rookie. He's going to have his ebb and flow. Randall Cobb's a slot guy. And it's very clear to me that there are a couple players for the Packers that are playing that are not healthy, and Cobb is one of them. The other one is Eddie Lacy that we'll get to a little bit later. One thing that is frustrating to me is that the Packers seem to use the same personnel, and I don't understand why Jeff Janis and Jared Abbrederis don't have some sort of role in the offense. Janis is a speed guy. He can take the top off the defense just by running a 9 route, and you can have the fear of that speed. With all due respect to Richard Rodgers, he's a nice role player, but he's not a star. He's definitely a player that can afford to come off the field for a guy like Janis or Abbrederis. And one thing that's concerning to me is when Devontae Adams does come back, I really hope that doesn't mean the end of Ty Montgomery seeing the field, because it just feels like that the Packers are ignoring their 4th and 5th wide receivers. Maybe that's due to a lack of trust in Janis or Abbrederis, but it's something that's been the case for a few years. I mean, even last year when they trusted Jarrett Boykin to be the starter for a game and a half, Devontae Adams wasn't getting on the field either. So that was disappointing. Is there a niche that they can carve out, or am I being a little crazy on these 4th and 5th receivers not getting any tick?
No, it's, okay, so I know we're going to get to this in more depth, but, I tweeted out when Janis made that play on the punt coverage and the touchback, I think he had an opportunity to get that ball down inside the field of play and pin the Rams inside their own 5-yard line. If he's aware of his surroundings, then, again, I get that the game's happening fast and he's running full speed and it's hard to twist and contort. And, we see that happen all the time where guys just aren't able to get themselves in position. Now, he ended up rolling into the end zone and just wasn't able to get the ball down. I don't want to completely blame him for it because I'd have to watch the game again to see if the play was, really Janis's fault or if it was something else. But he just always seems to be around situations where they just don't seem to always work out very well. He ran a 9 route against the Chiefs, the game that you and I were at, and he runs it down the sideline too close and doesn't give Aaron Rodgers any room to throw him the ball, and the ball ends up out of bounds. And, he needs to do it. He just, we know all the narrative about Aaron Rodgers and his faith and trust in Janis, and Janis is not really picking up the offense and knowing where to be and lining up and some of the easy mechanics of the offense. But that's why we're not seeing Jeff Janis more often, and that's why the Packers are having to go with other guys that aren't Janis and don't have the ability to run it deep. And, fortunately, if Devontae Adams is going to be out long term, I think the Packers would have probably IR'd him with the DTR designation. They haven't done that. So Adams is going to come back, and he's going to be that deep threat. Fortunately, the Packers keep winning, so they can afford to rest some of these starters and give them time to fully heal before they come back because it's not hurting the team's ability to win games. Jared Abbrederis, to me, that's just a matter of he's healing from an injury, coming back from a concussion, still recovering from the ACL. Hasn't played much in the offense, and so he's had limited time, limited reps with the offense itself. And he got in for a snap on a punt coverage last week, and he's a guy that Aaron Rodgers does like. And I would imagine would if Rodgers wanted him on the field, the Packers could probably find a package or two to throw him in at because and after the day that Richard Rodgers had today, Jacob, you mentioned him, we might see some Aberderis next week against a little bit less stout defense of the San Diego Chargers, and the Packers might try to open it up a little bit and add this wrinkle to their playbook if it's going to be a while before Adams comes back. So for Janis, again, it's just his inability to take steps forward and really improve, for no other reason than for Aberderis. To me, I think they're just bringing him along slowly, healing, coming back, learning the offense, but I think his day is coming soon.
You mentioned injuries. It's clear, at least to me and at my untrained eye, that Cobb's shoulder is still bothering him. Eddie Lacy appears to still be hampered by an ankle injury. And another guy who was hurt today made the biggest play on the offense today. Yeah, you guessed it. It was James Jones, because, Jason, all James Jones does
is catch touchdowns.
That is absolutely all he does. A 65-yard touchdown, outran a corner to the goal line, poorly spotted ball that the Packers had to waste a challenge on, which is something I'm noticing more and more of a trend of, as the officials in the league-wide are terrible at spotting the ball. I get that it's a hard game. It's a hard game to officiate. I certainly couldn't do it, but my goodness, these guys aren't in position, and the Packers had to waste, in my opinion, 2 challenges today because of shoddy spots. And Mike McCarthy made an emotional challenge on the first spot of the ball. It would have made it about 4th and a foot. And the other one, obviously, was the Jones touchdown. He was ruled down at the 1. Let's talk about the running game. The running game was anemic again today. Aaron Rodgers was the team's leading rusher. That's something that hasn't happened a lot since Eddie Lacy was into the fold. The Packers have become a much better running unit. But it's clear to me that they are limiting his workload more, and I still think that ankle's bothering him. And to the point enough where James Starks was getting more playing time, and it was clear today the Packers' game plan didn't include a whole lot of running, which was surprising to me because despite all the talk of the Rams' defensive line, they're not a particularly stout run defense. It's a defense that you thought the Packers would be able to lean on a little bit with their offensive line and run the ball a little bit. Is it time to give Lacy a break, or is it time to give him another game and have a shot of taking advantage of a Chargers team giving up 125 yards on the ground per game?
Well, Jacob, since you and I we both know that every NFL team and every NFL player listens to our podcast diligently. I don't want to give the San Diego Chargers any bulletin board material, but I do think it would be worth sitting Lacy down this next week, knowing that the bye is the week after. It's an ankle injuries, high or low. They need time to heal. And the Packers got it done today with virtually no running game against a really good defense. So this leads me to believe, and what I kind of foresee next week and what they're going to be up against, that I think they can probably get by without 27 on the field. You never want to go with it. He's a huge weapon, and he keeps defenses honest, and that's what, his presence is what opens up a lot of the passing game that makes all these receivers and Aaron Rodgers look so fantastic. So, but, I think you do have to kind of think with the long term in mind here. The Packers have something special going on at 5-0. They're starting to pull away from other teams in the conference, and they have a huge opportunity to really get a huge leg up in the division. I'm not saying it's time to start resting players, but this is a good opportunity with the bye week coming up. So, rest Lacy, because Starks proved he can handle the load, and he did just that, in the last game last week, and was able to kind of do what the Packers needed him to do in order to get a big victory there. So, yeah, I would say rest him. I mean, you don't want to, but I think it's time. You give him a couple weeks, and he comes back and he's fine. I remember back in 2013 when Rodgers was out and they were leaning on Lacy, and he had the ankle injury that he suffered against the Falcons, and he was able to kind of play through it. I mean, he's a tough kid, and he'll come back and he'll play fine, but you give him a couple weeks off and you get a fresh Eddie Lacy coming into the back half of the season. I can't imagine a better scenario for the Packs.
Nor can I, and I agree with you. I think it's time to give him a break for a week. He should probably not be active next week. Let Starks and Alonzo Harris handle the load. If they really feel it necessary with Lacy, then go ahead and promote John Crockett as a safety blanket of sorts there. One last thing on the offense, the Packers' offensive line, the matchup that we discussed a lot, it was discussed really universally, was Packers' offensive line against St. Louis's front four. Now, they got Brian Bulaga back. That was a boost. But T.J. Lane got hurt and left with a knee injury, ankle injury. We're not really 100% sure on that. It sounds like a neat. Lang, as I mentioned before, said he was going to be okay, but that could mean that he's just not having his leg amputated. Obviously, more information will come out as the week progresses. Josh Walker was the replacement, which was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought they would go with Barclay just for experience purposes, but he didn't get overwhelmed, which was nice. And if there really is one spot on the offensive line that the Packers can afford to have a average at best, below average player, it's right guard, because Rodgers can see that and get away from it. It's not on his blind side. The Packers, when they really need a yard or two, they run to their left anyways. They run behind Josh Sitton, which is always a good idea in my opinion. But they really did pretty well against the Rams. Like I mentioned, only 2 sacks. They had the one forced fumble allowed, which looked like the offensive line kind of held up a little bit, because I think everybody in the stadium, myself included, thought it was going to be a free play. As soon as the Rams recovered the fumble, I was just looking for a flag to nullify it, and that wasn't the case. The question I have is, at present state, how do we feel about the offensive line? And I feel okay about it. The one thing I would like to see is, last year the Packers were healthy for every game except one that Brian Bulaga, game and a half really, that Bulaga missed with an MCL sprain. But they built up that continuity over a season, and they haven't been able to do that this year, because it's like as soon as they start rolling a little bit, Bulaga got hurt before week 2. Bulaga comes back, Lang is out of the game now. The Packers haven't been able to build up some continuity with their offensive line, and that's worrisome a little bit. But if Lang's able to come back next week, it'll be the second game in a row that starting 5 has started together, which is going to be something to build on. You'll see it at the end of the year when that offensive line builds their continuity. They'll start run blocking better. They'll pass block better. They'll protect Rodgers better. I think it all goes well. Right now I feel okay about the offensive line. I just want them to get healthy. Do you have any concerns up front?
I mean, no, simply because they're winning. The Packers are winning games, and these are really tough guys. And if T.J. Lang tweets, "I'm fine," then he's going to come back at some point. But again, is next week an opportunity to maybe give him some rest? I don't know what the severity of that knee injury is. I mean, the Packers may not have a choice. They may have to rest him next week, the bye week, and then beyond. And if they do, I wasn't as surprised to see Josh Walker today. To be honest with you, I know that we talked about Don Barclay and how he's more of an interior lineman. So you would think we'd have more confidence in Barclay coming in relief of T.J. Lang than he's been in relief of Bulaga at the right tackle spot. But, when they put Josh Walker in there initially, that was great for me to see, because I thought, man, in the little bit of time that Walker spent out there, kind of as a tackle eligible, I think the Packers like him. They worked him into some of their sub packages on offense, and he really didn't do too badly. I mean, I don't know how he graded out, and I honestly didn't spend a lot of time watching him, but you don't hear his name, and from some of the recaps that I read, there was a lot of analysts too that seemed to think that he held his own, and we're talking about Aaron Donald. He's going up against Aaron Donald, who is one of the premier pass rushing defensive tackles in the league. So I can't say that he did a poor job, and I think again, this is another situation where maybe we saw today the Packers might have some options with Lang now. If they want to give him an extra week to get healthy, they might just start Walker and play him there next week against the Chargers. Now, I keep talking about this San Diego game like it's a preseason game or a scrimmage, but honestly, it's throwback weekend. We're going to talk about that. The Packers are going to be in a throwback uniform, although it's different than the one that they've worn for the last, 5 seasons. I'm pretty sure they're going to go with those really comfy pants that Aaron Rodgers likes. And so the Packers they're at home, they're in their throwbacks. I just feel so good about this game. I don't know. Maybe they will elevate Crockett. And we didn't talk about Alonzo Harris in the running game. I think also be a help in the run game too, to kind of backtrack there. But no, I think the offensive line will be fine. Jacob, though, your point, and you're an offensive lineman yourself, so you understand this better than I do, and a lot of people out there do too. Continuity on the offensive line, it sounds like some contrived phrase or statement. It is so true. It's not just a matter of okay, I know the guy next to me and I know what he's good at and what he's not good at, but there's so much communication, scheming, and sometimes they still revert back to that zone block scheme. You got to know what the guy next to you is doing, and you got to be able to tap him on the shoulder and know without speaking what they're going to be doing and where they're going, and be in sync, because if not, you're going to get your quarterback killed, the play's going to get blown up, and your offense is going to stall. But no, I think they'll be fine. It was great to see Bulaga back. Lang will eventually get back, and then we just cross our fingers. and hope that the line can stay together for the rest of the season.
You mentioned continuity and such, and I was an offensive lineman, albeit on a much smaller level, and realistically I was terrible. So, there's that. But I can tell you, any offensive line that we had when we got rolling, it was when we were able to start the same group together week after week after week, because you could kind of figure out, like me, I was a center or playing guard. If I played either spot, I could kind of figure out what the guy next to me was doing, what he was good at, what he wasn't so good at, when he would need help, plays he would need help on. And that's on a much smaller level. My team in high school ran the wishbone. So we're not talking about a spread offense with all the complications of communication and such and all the different things that come with it. It's really it's a completely different thing, but it's very real. The offensive line needs continuity, and that would be my only concern with that group up front going forward. The other thing would be, can they open more holes in the running game? And part of me wonders as if, part of the struggles of the run game has to do with the injury to the running back. That could be possible as well. But that all remains to be seen. I can't believe we're stopping the offensive segment as early as we are, because it was a home game at Lambeau Field where the Packers averaged just less than 800 points a game over the last season and a half or so. But we are. And that's because the Packers won their second straight game on defense. And that just sounds weird to say. I mean, this is a game, if I told you before the game, Aaron Rodgers is going to turn the ball over 3 times, and the Packers are only going to score 24 points, past experience has to tell you that the Packers probably didn't do so well in that game. They won 24-10. One of the big things that continues to carry the day is the pass rush. Packers had 3 sacks, 12 quarterback hits. Clay Matthews is an absolute expletive monster. I don't really have a better superlative for that. That's what he is. And, I mean, it's to the point now where he's lining up all over the place and he's getting home. I mean, he only had a sack and a half today, I believe was his final total, and probably a half dozen hurries. I mean, the Packers absolutely dominated this game at the line of scrimmage in the passing game. I know Todd Gurley ended up getting his, but I really thought for the most part they held up well against the run as well. Final totals for that: 3 sacks, 12 quarterback hits, 4 interceptions. One of those was returned for a touchdown by my guy, who I told you guys about in training camp, who I thought was going to be better than Demarius Randall. Hasn't worked out that way as of yet. That is Quentin Rollins. Packers took a 7-0 lead. It was a little back and forth for a while. Rodgers threw a pick. Hyde got a pick. Micah Hyde filled in very well for Morgan Burnett again. Got an interception after Foles was hurried again. And then on the following defensive possession, Quentin Rollins had a ball thrown right into his mitts, and it was a pick 6. And that's the Packers' first pick 6 of the season, and I think you'll hear more about this later. The question I have, Demarius Randall played well again also, and Sam Shields also looked very good. I know they haven't faced Calvin Johnson or Julio Jones or Des Bryant. The best receiver they've probably faced so far this year has to be either Jeremy Maclin, who got a lot of his production in garbage time, or a very hobbled Alshon Jeffrey. But nonetheless, the growing pains in the defense, especially in the secondary that I expected, have not shown up yet. What can we say about these young corners? What I can say, they're ballers. I mean, as of right now, that's really the best way to put it. Rollins, when his limited playing time, he's played very well. He had the interception that saved the game. He had another interception in the game other than the pick 6. Interception with the team up 24-10. The Rams had a glimmer of hope, and Rollins just kind of undercut a route and got an interception. He probably could have scored on that play if it weren't the last play of the game. So we're talking about a potential for 2 pick 6s in one game. That's encouraging. Demarius Randall is kind of the silent assassin. He hasn't had a flashy play yet. Quentin Rollins is kind of the first to be the rookie to get his hands on the ball. But Demarius Randall's played very well. I can't think of a play that he was targeted and given up big yardage. The Packers struggled with some things the Rams had, but that was more the Rams using the Packers' aggressiveness against them. And one thing I did like about this game, the one complaint I've had about the defense so far this season is when they've gotten a lead, it feels like they've gone into coast mode. And today they didn't go into coast mode. They didn't go into it last week either. They stayed aggressive. They got after Foles, and ultimately were able to get 4 picks. Joe Thomas should have had one, and then it could have been a touchdown, and then it was intercepted by Clinton Dix. So your interceptions on the day, 1 for Clinton Dix, 1 for Micah Hyde, and 2 for Quentin Rollins, 4 total on Nick Foles. But the question I get back to then is, what can we say about this young secondary? It's got to be encouraging if you're a Packers fan.
It's very encouraging. Remember during the preseason before Nelson got hurt and everybody was talking about the embarrassment of riches the Packers had on offense and all the weapons they were going to have and how the offense was just going to outscore everybody and the defense just needed to kind of be okay and not give up as many points, and the Packers were on their way to a deep playoff run? Well, that embarrassment of riches seems to be on both sides of the ball now. If you look at the contributions the Packers have already gotten from Randall and now from Rollins today, I knew Rollins' time was going to come. He just needed to get on the field. We saw some of his ball hawking ability in the preseason. That first preseason game, he had a nice interception against the Patriots, and then he had a little bit of struggles, which every rookie is going to have. But he bounced back quickly, and in fact, on his game-saving interception, or I shouldn't say his game-saving interception, actually it was kind of the dagger. I'm sure that was Larrabee's dagger today. Just 2 or 3 plays prior to that, he gets beat deep for the long touchdown catch by Stedman Bailey. And cornerbacks, they say they have to have short memories. And for a rookie, you figure, they're gonna probably have a tougher time letting some of that stuff go because they want to make big plays and they know that they're going to make mistakes and they don't want to let their team down and everyone's counting on them. And when they get in there and, you give up a long pass play like that, at that point, even at that point, the Packers still had the game pretty well in hand. You want to make the play, and he ended up making it in the end. And so, it's a big triumph there. But, I mean, these young guys are playing great. Demarius Randall, like I said, wasn't much. I think he's establishing himself as a defensive back that you don't want to mess with. He can cover the deep ball okay. He doesn't have the speed that Sam Shields does. Shields had a nice day. While we're at it, while we're talking about some of the young guys, let's not forget about Sticky today. He almost had an interception, dropped one, and that was a tough play that he went up for, but got a pass defense on it. I mean, secondary's playing great. With the nice interception in the end zone. If all these young guys are going to contribute, then, with what they're going to get from the veterans too, this Packers team, I keep hearing Aaron Rodgers say the same thing week after week in his post-game comments and his press conferences, they're going to be really tough to beat. And it's great to see these guys playing well because, first of all, Jacob, you and I predicted that they would, and it makes us look good. But it's fun to watch rookies contribute and play well. It kind of takes you back a little bit, and I know this was kind of a little before you became a very aware, fanatical fan. But, I remember the 1996 season when Craig Newsom was rookie, and they had some young defensive backs back there, too. I mean, they had Eugene Robinson and Leroy Butler, who were like steady, sturdy veteran safeties. But you had Doug Evans, and you had Craig Newsom at cornerback, and they both ended up becoming really key pieces to the Packers Super Bowl run that year, and they had a couple young linebackers, too. I mean, what a great situation to be in when you can turn to almost any level of your roster. And obviously the 4th and 5th guys and the 53rd guy on the roster up to the 50th guy probably you don't want to be turning to on a regular basis. But you turn to any of this depth, and they can play and come up with big play after big play. That's the big thing that the Packers are going to feast on and feed off of. And it's a great thing to see. I'll leave the rest of it. I know we're going to talk about some of these other guys. I mean, Matthew was great, but as far as those DBs go, excited to watch more magic like we saw today from Rollins, Randall, and company.
Absolutely, and one corner that you missed from that 96 team was Tyrone Williams, who had a hell of a one-handed interception in the NFC Championship game. So, yeah, a lot of similarities between that situation in 96 and this situation in 2015. I don't want to compare the two teams, obviously, because a long way to go before the Green Bay Packers of this year can be looked at in the same regard as that year's team, which, of course, was 13-3, number 1 in points scored, number 1 in points allowed, and won Super Bowl 31 over the New England Patriots in New Orleans, Louisiana. We've talked about the improvement of special teams, and today was a bit of a step backward. There's a few things. Richard Rodgers had a field goal taken off the board because of a hands-to-the-face penalty. That moved the offense out of field goal range. Packers ended up having to punt. It was 21-10 at the time. That kick would have made it 24-10. And that was big at the time. And it was a struggle. You got some other things. Jeff Janis, Tim Mastey had a nice punt, which feels like it's weird to say because it doesn't happen as often as you'd like anymore. But Janis could have downed the ball at about the 2-yard line, maybe the 1. We're talking matter of inches here. But he fell down and he was running really fast, and I get all that, but he went into the end zone and just kind of didn't come in under control when realistically it looked like that's the way the ball was going to bounce in the Packers' favor. And perhaps the most frustrating part of special teams today was a fake punt that the Rams were able to pull off. Dimitri Goodson on the play, the Packers had it covered. He fell down, and the punter was able to complete a pass over the middle to extend a drive. Now, Greg Zuerlein ended up missing a field goal on that. More on that momentarily, because I have a what the hell are you thinking moment for Jeff Fisher coming up here. And you probably aren't going to want to miss that. But the trick plays on special teams, Jeff Fisher himself told reporters they run some trickery this week, and you saw some of that. The gadgety plays to Tavon Austin, which were pretty effective for the Rams. They kind of went to the well one too many times on that during the game. But there was that, and then obviously the fake punt. You know, obviously they had it covered, but it just seems like whenever a team runs these kinds of plays against the Packers, they always work. And we have to be sick of that at this point, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I kind of, I know we worked together on the script. I worded it that way because I understand Goodson slipped and fell. Okay, fine. And those of you who follow me on Twitter know this was about when I lost my you-know-what. I just get tired of the same, and it doesn't matter what the reason is, so let's throw the reason out the window. I understand. Slip and fall, it happens to everybody. It happens over and over and over again. The Packers just, if I was channeling my inner Bill Johnson from Green and Gold today, I would say if I'm an opposing special teams coordinator and head coach, I'm going to run a fake punt at the Packers every single week until they can show me they can stop it, which I know is hyperbole and it's ridiculous. The Packers actually had it played well, and if Goodson's in position and isn't on the ground, he probably breaks up the pass, and it's a non-issue. But nonetheless, the Rams are able to convert a 20-yard pass by a punter when their head coach, Jeff Fisher, telegraphed earlier in the week that, yes, we're going to try to run some trickery and we're going to try to do some things to steal a possession here and there, which, is, you mentioned Jeff Fisher, and he's just, don't you kind of wish you were in the NFC West? And not that you want to play the Rams twice a year, because I'd be happy if we don't see the Rams for a couple of years, to be honest with you, after today. But he's just so entertaining and just so interesting with the way that he operates and just is very candid about things and shares information and just says, yeah, this is what we're going to do. What are you going to do about it? And it's just that bravado that baffles me. But, yeah, I mean, it was frustrating because the special teams for the Packers have been improving, and they've been an area where they haven't really cost the Packers games in field position like they had in the past. And then today, unfortunately, that trend came to a screeching halt, not only on the fake punt, but and you had the field goal that was negated by the hands to the face penalty by Richard Rodgers, who probably had the roughest day of anybody on the Packers roster today. Hopefully this was just a blip on the radar and they can get healthy next week. I don't know much about San Diego's special teams coverage and their special teams ability, but Ty Montgomery didn't even get a chance to return a kick today. I mean, first of all, that's a function of the Packers only giving up 10 points and the Rams only kicked off twice. So there weren't many opportunities, and when they did, the kicks were buried out of the end zone. So it just, but again, Jacob, that's just, have your opinion on it and be more level-headed than I am. That's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm just so tired of the Packers getting befuddled by these trick plays. And I saw it coming because the Packers were in punt block formation, and I thought there's no better time to run a fake than right now when you've got man coverage on the outside and, maybe they were disguising the look, and they ended up having it covered, but the Rams weren't even trying to hide what it was that they were doing. I mean, the punter grabbed the ball and immediately just stood up and was motioning his receiver to get open and move, and I'm like, somebody needs to get on that guy, and I had a feeling it was going to be a fake. Then it was a fake, and then I thought, oh, they'll get it covered. They're not going to convert this, and then they did convert it, and so it was not rated PG in my household at that moment. Let's just put it at that. Fortunately, the Packers got the win. I don't know if I have a whole lot else to say about the special teams in this particular game.
Well, JJ learned some new words today is what I'm gathering from that information. You mentioned Jeff Fisher. One thing I do want to talk about. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yes, maybe a few. And so Dad will take the blame for that, absolutely.
Absolutely. So daycare people, whoever watches JJ when his parents are working, we apologize on behalf of Pulse of the Pack because I'm going to take the blame for it as well because that's what a good leader does. You mentioned Jeff Fisher. There's one thing that in the game that just absolutely baffled me. It was 21-10. The Packers got a sack from Clay Matthews. It was in the fourth quarter, and the Rams were able to gain about 8 or 9 yards on 3rd and 16. It's 4th and 7, and he decides to send out Greg Zuerlein for a 63-yard field goal. Now, I understand the idea of the field goal because that'll get you within one possession. However, earlier in the game, Zuerlein hooked a kick pretty badly, and he had one blocked by Dayton Jones, which was a positive play for special teams. We mentioned playing negatives, there's positive. Dayton Jones blocked a field goal, and that kid looks like he might be a player. That's really exciting to see on the defensive side of the ball and in special teams in this case. But Fisher sent him out for a 63-yard field goal, and it's not like it was 4th and 17. It was 4th and 7. That's manageable, all things considered. I know that the Rams hadn't had much success in obvious passing situations against the Packers today, but there's got to be a better solution than a 63-yard field goal in that situation, doesn't there?
I mean, yeah, you're at Lambeau Field, so aren't historically the wins at Lambeau Field supposed to be not very kicker friendly? I mean, you're at more games than I am. So, I mean, isn't that the case?
Yeah, that is the case, and I can tell you the wind was a little funky today because you could tell it affected Zuerlein on the kick that he missed wide left, and that was in the opposite end zone. So I don't know what he was thinking there. I'm standing there, and, I've always thought Jeff Fisher was a little overrated as a head coach. It seems like his teams are consistently 8-8. They have 1 year where they pop and win 12 or 13 games, and then he's pretty much 8-8 from there on out. And today, that decision baffled me, and believe me, there are plenty of coaching decisions that do that on a weekly basis. I can't think of one that got me as bad as that one did today. That was horrendous, and I hope I wasn't able to listen to Jeff Fisher's press conference, obviously, because I don't follow a lot of Rams Twitter, or I didn't listen to a Rams post-game show today. I really hope somebody asked him what the hell he was thinking on that, because I have no idea. I know Greg Zuerlein has a big leg. They called him Legatron during his rookie year. He's got the distance and such, but even still, kicking a 63-yard field goal is a lot to ask anyone. The only way I'm considering that is if it's a much younger Adam Vinatieri with Zuerlein's leg and they're in a dome. But that's about the only way I'm considering that. And even still, I'm probably going for it, even though the offense was less than stellar today for the Rams. But that was interesting, to say the least. That brings us to the Mayfield Sports Marketing Play of the Game. We do this every week. We mention the play of the game that swung it in the Packers' favor. Mine, you guys had to know this was coming as soon as it happened. The Packers could have lost the game 28-14, and I probably would have gone with that play. But Quentin Rollins' interception return for a touchdown, it was an exciting play. It was a big play early in the game. It gave the Packers a 14-0 lead. Kind of sent a message that their defense was there and they were going to be in Nick Foles' face all game. And they were. The pressure on Foles caused the interception, but Rollins catches it, returns it about 30, 40 yards for a touchdown. It was exciting to see a rookie make a big play in a big spot, and I think this kid, I've mentioned in training camp, I've mentioned as long as anybody's been willing to listen to me, I think this kid's going to be a player, and he proved some of that reason why today. I'll give him a knock. He did give up the big deep ball to Stedman Bailey late in the game when the game was relatively decided, made up for it with another interception. But my Mayfield Sports Marketing Play of the game is Quentin Rollins' pick six at the end of the first quarter that really gave the Packers a two-possession lead that they held for most of the day. Jason, what is your Mayfield Sports Marketing Play of the game?
Well, yours was definitely big, and, I love to tweet out first celebrations of big first for the Packers. So my signature tweet this season seems to be, if you picked X or insert great play here, claim your prize, and it was obviously the first Packers pick six of the season. Couldn't have been for to a better guy in your case, Jacob. So congrats on that front, even though I know you weren't the guy that made the play, but very exciting nonetheless. And obviously that leaves a couple of other plays up for grabs. I'm pretty sure everybody can probably guess which direction I'm going to go, and that would be the James Jones catch and run for a touchdown. All he does, Jacob, is
catch touchdowns. All he does is catch touchdowns.
He didn't have one last week, but, it was an amazing play that Jones made today because he was limping around. He wasn't at a full strength. You could just tell when he's running some of his routes. He's limping around. He's less than 100%. He doesn't have the speed, but Rodgers hits him on that crossing pass. He bobbles the ball a little bit, gathers it in, and then just takes off running as if there's nothing wrong with him, like he was playing possum the whole time. Being chased by a cornerback, gets down the field. He's got the cornerback bearing down on him. Now, when he gets down towards the end line, this is one of those veteran savvy plays where it's not even just a matter of having James Jones and his talent on this roster when the Packers are down a couple of wide receivers, but this is one of the smartest plays I've seen all season by anybody in the league. So Jones is aware of where he's at. He's at about the 5-yard line, and he's got to start making his final move to get into the end zone. But instead of leaving his feet and diving and risking his knee coming down before the ball hits the end line, he actually uses his free hand to kind of spring himself forward a little bit and push himself, keep himself off the ground, lunging at the end line, getting the ball over the plane, landing the ball on the plane of the goal line without his knee ever having touched the ground. The play was initially ruled down at the 1. It was reviewed and overturned and called a touchdown. I was nervous for a second not because of James Jones and the play itself. I knew it was a touchdown, but because we've seen the NFL have some very big problems calling plays correctly this season, I need only point to the end of the last week's Monday Night Football game as evidence of that. But alas, the crew got it correct, and James Jones once again in the end zone with a huge score. And that was what put the Packers up over one score and really put a lot of pressure on St. Louis to have to start moving the ball, get in the end zone, and that's when Nick Foles did what we all hoped that he would do as we were kind of preparing for this week, which was make a lot of mistakes, and that he did. So, James Jones, long catch and run touchdown. All he does is catch touchdowns. So far, the unsung hero of this team. That is my Mayfield Sports Marketing Play of the Week.
And that wraps up the segment of the Mayfield Sports Marketing Play of the Game. We will do this every week. Hopefully it's a Packers play every single week. It has been so far with a 5-0 football team. One thing also that I want to mention, I did mention it earlier, you kind of talked about his lunge to the goal line and things of that nature. Again, I was quite far away from the play at that point. But even still, to me, live, it looked like a touchdown in real time. I have no idea how they decided he was down at the 1. But nonetheless, the Packers ended up having to waste a challenge, and they got the touchdown out of it, so I'm not going to complain too much. We mentioned injuries. I do want to talk about a couple. Morgan Burnett and Jake Ryan and Devontae Adams were down today. They added T.J. Lang. Nick Perry had a shoulder injury, which it never fails. Nick Perry builds momentum and then gets hurt. It's the same shoulder he had surgery on in the offseason. Something in there is just not right. B.J. Raji left with a groin injury and did not return to the game. And you could tell some of the impact that had as the Packers' defensive line situation. The rotation was shortened. It looked like some guys were getting gassed a little bit, especially in the run game when Todd Gurley had his big run down the sideline late in the game before the Clinton Dix interception. But the Packers have overcome injuries before. I think they'll continue to do it. You got this bye week really can't come soon enough, and that's going to lead us to the Packers game, the last game they'll have before the bye week. It's a home game. It's Throwback weekend with the Throwback uniforms at Lambeau Field against the San Diego Chargers. It is a 3:25 Central Time kickoff. Also something I want to mention, friends of the program here, friends of the entire organization, if you will, that we have at Cheesehead TV, Kyle Cousineau and Wally Tingle are going to put on one hell of a party. Throwback weekend will be at the Green Bay Distillery. I will be in attendance. Jason, unfortunately, can't make it down. He lives in Arizona, which is why we got to get him to move to the Midwest so we can actually do this show together. Jason, hint, hint. But if you are coming to Throwback Weekend, please feel free to tweet out and let me know that you're coming, and I will be more than happy to say hi and talk some Packers with you. I got some friends coming up with me. We put on a hell of a party. I can speak. You haven't lived until you've partied with Mike Rettersdorf. So Green Bay Distillery, 7 o'clock Saturday night. Please be there. Let me know if you're going to be there. We can sit and chat some Packers. And hopefully, one other thing on the college side of things, a Michigan Wolverines victory over the Michigan State Spartans is what I'm rooting for this weekend. But anywho, that's college football. That's party stuff. The main attraction, obviously, this Sunday is going to be the game. Jason, you mentioned they'll be wearing those horrific throwback uniforms that I absolutely despise. Blue jerseys, gold numbers. The good news about the numbers this year is they'll actually be visible so I can tell who the hell is playing and where without having to pick out a particular trait. For example, I knew who Andrew Corliss was because of his tattoos on his tricep that say God's gifts, which I find quite funny. And it's kind of a running joke on Packers Twitter, I suppose. But I'm not going to make fun of his tattoos. I don't know what they mean, and I'm sure that's a positive thing. But anywho, they play the Chargers. The Chargers play tomorrow night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Chargers are not an elite team, but they're always one of those teams that seem to be in the running. They have a very good quarterback in Phillip Rivers, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated players, one of the most underrated quarterbacks especially in all of football. The Chargers, however, will be on a short week and making a long travel to the Midwest after facing the Steelers on Monday Night Football. And they're coming into what is, I can't think of another one, the biggest home field advantage in all of football, and that's Lambeau Field. The Packers win by 2 possessions here on a routine basis. And that's where the Chargers are going to have to go. That's what they're going to have to overcome. We're going to start here with a matchup in the Packers' favor here. One thing I like for the Packers, we mentioned it earlier, they got to get their running game going at some point. I've often discussed I'm a big believer in throwing the football will win you a football game and you run the ball to grind out the clock. However, the Chargers give up over 120 yards a game on the ground. I don't know if Eddie Lacy's going to play. We kind of talked about that earlier, or if he is going to play in kind of the same role that he has been. But James Starks is more than capable of getting the job done. Packers can slow down the rush, open some play-action passes to push the ball down the field. The Chargers pass rush still has some juice to it. They have 12 sacks on the season right now, but they're not as stout up front as the Rams. Almost any team is going to be a downgrade from the Rams' defensive line. You can run the ball on this team. And I like James Starks' ability, Alonzo Harris, Randall Cobb, Ty Montgomery, Eddie Lacy, whoever it is the Packers decide to use in the backfield. I think they can run the ball at will against this defense. I love that matchup. Packers offensive line, even if it doesn't have T.J. Lang, I think they're going to be able to ram the ball down the Chargers' throat. So that's my matchup in the favor. Jason, what is yours?
Okay, so I got to go with the passing game. I think this is, like I said earlier, I think this is a game where the Packers can get healthy on the passing game and kind of silence some of those who are wondering if they're going to be okay with the mass unit of receivers that they have, and with Devontae Adams hurting and with Cobb's shoulder bothering him, and he was kind of not really a factor today, and James Jones on 1.5 legs. I think the Chargers present, you never want to take an NFL team lightly, and they're all pros for a reason, but the Packers have just, they've faced either current or former juggernaut after juggernaut after juggernaut every week this season, if you think about it. In one way or shape or form, every opponent that they've faced has had some sort of a big top performer, or they faced a really, really tough defense or pass rush, some of the best in the league. Even in week 1 against the Bears, who were having a rough season, Matt Forte ran all over the Packers. Today it was both a tough defense and Todd Gurley running all over the Packers after they had a lot of success stopping the run. But I think the Chargers coming in, it's just going to be tough for them. They're short week, long road trip. You've got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. He's going to probably be a little ticked off at the way he's played the past couple of weeks. In that, he didn't have a terrible game last week, but he didn't play great. He definitely didn't play great today, and he's going to be looking to atone for that. So I think that passing game is going to get healthy. That's what I like. I like Rodgers in the passing game against the San Diego secondary. And on that note, Jacob, I don't want to hijack the show here, but we kind of glossed over all that was made of the end of the interception-less streak that Rodgers had at Lambeau Field that lasted almost 3 full calendar years, almost over 1,000 days, and he threw 2 today, one of which was tipped at the line. And that play seemed to be every network's favorite highlight to start off the highlight reel with on this game, which is interesting to me because I get that it's a big deal, but are you glad that this streak is over now and then Aaron Rodgers can just focus on playing football? We know that he's human, and, yeah, he might make some mistakes, but, hey, he's still going to kick your ass?
Well, I mean, obviously I wasn't thrilled at the time. I never like when the quarterback throws an interception because the Packers, realistically, he had a receiver open on that play and would have gotten a first down. So the Packers could have gone up by an even larger margin at that point. But I'm glad it's over. It kind of reminded me, just because the ball's in the air doesn't mean that our guy's going to catch it. Their guy can too. And I'm glad it's over. He can kind of stop getting questions asked about an interception-free season or an interception-free season at home again. It's over, it's done with, and your quarterback is very, very good if the leading highlight is him throwing an interception and acting like it's this huge surprise. So nice that it's over, but let's not make a habit of those things, and I'm sure he won't because he never has. I mean, I believe it was Michael Rodney of Packers Notes, at Packers Notes. He's a pretty good follow for you guys if you want to check that out. But he tweeted that Rodgers was on pace to throw 42 touchdowns and 6 picks after today's game. What a slacker, or something, some sarcastic remark along those lines. And I agree. I made the joke to a couple of my buddies that were standing around, and I said, maybe it's Scott Tolzien time after he threw the second interception. But I joke. I don't want to see Scott Tolzien play quarterback. So football gods, if you heard that, I'm kidding. Don't subject me to that again if you don't have to. But yeah, I'm glad it's over. And now the Packers can kind of just get back to their own thing. That's Rob Domofsky had a story that was 2 interception streaks that won't be likely to be repeated again. The streak between Rodgers' interception in 2012 and the one today, and then he went 6 passes without a pick, and he threw another one today. So he threw 2 today, obviously, and there were 6 passes between the first and the second one. Those are 2 streaks that won't be repeated, more likely than not. But now that that's over, we are going to move on from it as well. What is the matchup not in the Packers' favor? And the one, I don't want to act like I'm dismissing the San Diego Chargers. Jason, you were talking earlier about how we're kind of talking about this game like it's a preseason game or a scrimmage, and, can they rest this guy and get him healthy and things like that. And, the NFL is hard to win in. It just is. I think that we've seen that the last 2 weeks with some gritty wins over some opponents that were largely seen as inferior. And it's, those teams, credit to them, they hung in, but the Packers were able to come out with a victory, obviously. But, I don't want to talk about this like it's a scrimmage because I do think the Chargers are a good team. And I've mentioned I love Phillip Rivers. I know a lot of people don't like his cocky attitude, but the reality is that guy can play, and he earned every ounce of respect that I have when he played the AFC Championship game against the undefeated New England Patriots with a torn ACL. Some call it stupid. That may be a little of it too, but I call it honorable. And the other thing about that game I'll never forget is while his quarterback's playing out there with one leg, LaDainian Tomlinson's sitting on a sideline pouting for whatever reason. But the Chargers didn't end up winning that game. Nonetheless, Phillip Rivers did play that game with a torn ACL. But the matchup not in the Packers' favor is looking ahead to the bye week. And what I mean by that is this is a game that on paper I think the Chargers defense is able to be exploited. I think the Packers defense is very good. I think that you can say that now, and you can say that with some conviction, and it doesn't sound like complete homerism. I think the Packers can rattle Phillip Rivers into some mistakes. I think their offense can move the ball down the field, and I think that it's going to be a fun game to watch at Lambeau Field if they are focused on the game and not the upcoming bye week, because you see some teams. In the past, Mike McCarthy has been very good before the bye. His teams have been very good. They're very focused. Last year, however, they got trounced in New Orleans right before the bye week. This game will be different. It's at home. The Packers are dominant at home. That's obviously been mentioned a million times over. But I think that if the Packers could find themselves looking forward to a bye week to get healthy, rest some guys with injuries. Lacey might be one. Cobb won't be one. I think he's made it pretty clear he's going to play regardless of what the case is. He says there's no such thing as 100% in the NFL. I agree with him. However, Randall, you don't look like you're at 80% at the moment either. Anywho, if they're looking ahead to the bye week, this is a Chargers team that could jump up and beat them. It's not a huge game. It's an interconference opponent or outer conference opponent, whatever way you want to look at it. It's an AFC team they don't see a lot, unfamiliar opponent. The Chargers do have some weapons that can exploit them, but I think the Packers will be focused and ready for this game. I just think that potential hangover effect may not be in their favor. But realistically, you'll see when I get to my game pick here, I just can't picture the Chargers hanging around very much in this game. But, Jason, what is your matchup that worries you the most?
Okay, so the matchup that I liked the most was the Packers passing game against the Chargers pass defense, and so the matchup that I like the least is the complete reverse, which would be, the reverse would be the run against the run defense. I'm going to go with the Chargers passing game against the Packers passing defense. Now, we just heaped a ton of praise on the Green Bay secondary earlier in the show. I don't think they won't be up to the task. I'm just simply looking at it from the standpoint of the Chargers have the third best passing offense in football right now. Phillip Rivers is a very savvy veteran quarterback, tends to rack up a ton of yards against the Packers. I know he had a bunch of yards in 2011 in that game in San Diego I actually happened to be in attendance for, which turned into Lambeau Field West, which was absolutely amazing. And I think he did have a pretty good game in 2007, that game that you mentioned, Jacob, and I remember that one very well. It was kind of disappointing to see and Tomlinson going at it on the sideline. You never like to see those kinds of things, especially when it's two well-established veterans like that. But the Packers ended up getting a big win. I think Favre threw a nice little game winner on a slant to Jennings in that one, I remember, and that was when the Packers started that season, I think 4-0. So I think the Chargers are coming up against a buzzsaw right now, and as much as we got to get over this. Are the Packers going to let down? Is this a trap game? The Green Bay's been in this situation a couple times already this season. The Monday nighter against the Chiefs, you can look at today's game as a potentially, being one of those. This team is not going to have a letdown. If they're going to get beat, it's because they're just simply going to get beat. And I think eventually at some point this season they probably will, smack me for saying that. But I don't think it's going to be for a lack of trying. But I do think, Rivers has only been sacked 5 times this season. So, Aaron Rodgers came into last week's game having only been sacked 3 times. And then in the last 2 weeks, he's been taken down. I don't know how many he had on him today, but, I think he was sacked at least twice today, so 5. I mean, the Chargers are doing a good job of protecting Rivers, and given time, he's going to find somebody who's wide open. Keenan Allen is a great wide receiver, the type of guy that can give the Packers fits. So they're going to have to be on top of their game. But I think, like I said, I think they're up to the task. And I had to pick a matchup that concerned me. But obviously from the tone of the show already in between what I've been saying about this game against the Chargers overall, I'm not really all that worried about it. I had to pick something.
That matchup you mentioned is one I will be looking at very closely, is the Chargers pass blocking against the Packers pass rush, because the pass rush has been lethal, even when they haven't been getting home. Obviously, today the sack numbers weren't as gaudy, only 3, but they were in Foles' face all day. And there was one hit that Clay Matthews laid on Nick Foles early in the game, and it was hellacious. I mean, I swear, I was at the top of the concourse, and I insist to all of you, I could hear the pads pop on that play. It was insane. But that's definitely a matchup that I will be looking at, which leads us to game predictions. It's Throwback weekend. It's Lambeau Field. It's Aaron Rodgers. It's the Green Bay Packers against Phillip Rivers and the San Diego Chargers. I've talked about it. We've talked about it. You can kind of tell by the tone of the show again how this is going to go, but one thing I will say I expect Melvin Gordon to bust a big run at some point, just because that's a storyline that's begging to be written, is Melvin Gordon having a big day in his return to Wisconsin. But even still, I can't picture this game being close. And I don't mean that to sound disrespectful to the Chargers, but the Packers, the founder of our show, Marcus Eversole, will love that I'm mentioning this, but they always play well in those throwback uniforms. They've dominated every game that they've played in them. This game, I think, will be fun to watch. I think the Packers win this game big. I think that the defense shows up. They rise to the occasion against a top-level quarterback, which is something they haven't seen yet, unless you include Russell Wilson in that category, which I do not. But top-level quarterback with Phillip Rivers, solid passing game. I think the Packers can do just about whatever they want against this defense. And I think the Packers defense is going to make some more plays. It's going to be fun to watch. I like Green Bay 41-17 going into the bye, setting up a 6-0 and 6-0 showdown potentially with the Denver Broncos following the bye. I am so jacked about that matchup, but we will talk about that more. We have probably 2 shows to talk about that, to be honest with you, depending on time constraints and such. But anywho, Green Bay 41, San Diego 17, big day at Lambeau Field for the Green Bay Packers. Jason, what do you got?
I have something hilarious. So, if you follow me on Twitter, you know how I am kind of during the game. Today was I didn't let you down at all. I had kind of my meltdown towards the end of the first half and the way the Packers were kind of letting the momentum slip away and heading into the second half. And so I had my usual exchange with some of my Twitter followers who maybe aren't as familiar with me. But I feel like after 3 years, Jacob, because I know I'm kind of negative Nancy in your eyes, and we have this fun back and forth about it because, I love this team, but I get this, I use the term realistic take. You have a different, adjective for it. But I think I'm starting to finally get through to some of my followers to where they just kind of tune me out. Like they either hit the mute button or they're finally realizing like, okay, he's just being an idiot. And they just kind of tune me out now instead of blocking me or unfollowing me or like tweeting at me and getting mad. And, at one point I kind of tried to, flip the script on everybody and like throw everybody off. And I started saying like, oh, they'll be fine. Don't worry. They got this, when I was absolutely not confident that they were going to, but they ended up doing it. And it was funny because nobody bought into that either. I don't know. I just think it's funny. So I said to myself like, okay, that's it. After today and until this offense gets healthy again, I'm not going to pick the Packers to score a ton of points. I'm not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe and say the Packers are going to throw up over 30 points because the last 2 weeks they haven't even managed to, score 30. So I'm not going to do it. But as we're sitting here talking and I'm looking at this next week and I'm kind of looking at the matchup and kind of deciding which way I want to go after I just set that standard of don't go over 30, I have the Packers winning this game 35-21. And I think it's going to be one of those things where, like, San Diego scores a late touchdown to make it look closer than it was, because I just think the energy is going to be big. It's throwback weekend. The fans are getting excited for the special kind of vibe that we have about this team. And now that they've won 5, it's like, okay, now it's legit. They've went through a full quarter of the season undefeated, and they've beaten their 5th opponent. This was a really good defense. Once again, hey, are they going to spoil the Packers' home winning streak? Are they going to hand the Packers their first loss of the season? Rodgers throws a couple of interceptions, so things aren't going the way that we're used to seeing them, and they're dealing with adversity. But the Packers are now, they're we're getting to that fever pitch where you're going to have a very, very active and loud crowd at Lambeau Field. Get Loud Lambeau is definitely going to be in effect. So I got 35-21. I think the Packers play well, but I will say this, they do kind of like to let the obvious kind of, get them at times in games. So don't be surprised if you see Melvin Gordon pop off a 99-yard run for a touchdown late in the game when it doesn't matter in front of some of his Wisconsin Badger fans at Lambeau Field. But again, Green Bay gets the win. I think they go into the bye 6-0, and then, yeah, Jacob, it's going to be a lot of fun. Not to look too far ahead, but cannot wait to do that show previewing that game against the Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning, who pulled another rabbit out of his hat today against the Raiders despite throwing 2 picks to Chuck Woodson.
King Charles Woodson. That's a Michigan man right there for you, too, leading up into next week's rivalry weekend, Michigan and Michigan State. Perfect way to end today's show. So we both like the Packers to win this week and get into 6-0 right before the bye. Hopefully they can get some guys healthy in that bye week. Hell, I'll even say get some guys healthy this week. Let's see if this team, we've talked a lot about how the team has played well despite this and that going wrong. One thing we haven't talked about, Morgan Burnett, you could argue, is the Packers' 3rd most important defensive player, and he has played 1 game this year. Packers have won all of them without him. Brian Bulaga came back today. He's played 2 full games. Interesting there as well. The offensive line held up relatively well in his absence. Devontae Adams hasn't played a snap that he was healthy since the first half of the Seattle game. Re-injured his ankle against the Kansas City Chiefs and was unable to go. Packers continue to overcome injuries. I mentioned they're going to continue to overcome that. But that's going to do it for today's show. Be sure to check out PackersTalk.com for all your latest Packers news and podcasts. You can follow the show on Twitter at Pulse of the Pack. You can follow me personally at Jacob Westendorf. You can follow Jason at Jason Perrone. Throwback is this weekend. Green Bay Distillery, 7 p.m. There is no cover charge. Let me know that you're going. Come talk Packers football with me. I will be wearing a blue Michigan Wolverines Charles Woodson jersey. There you go. Now you know how to spot me. I will be covered in maize and blue on Saturday night, 7 o'clock at the Green Bay Distillery. It's going to be a great party. I went last year. Ross Uglum from the Benches will be there. I do know that. Looking forward to that reunion as well. Would like to see some of you guys there as we can chat a little bit, talk some Packers football, and then go on Sunday and watch the Packers kick the crap out of the San Diego Chargers. That game is Sunday, 3:25 Central Time. We want to thank our sponsors, Mark Mayfield and Waukesha Sports. We mentioned their stuff in the opening. We want to appreciate all the things that those guys do. Be sure to listen to us next week. We'll have a time and a date set for you. We'll tweet out the show. Again, send us questions, send us comments, send us concerns, whatever you guys want to do. We want you to reach out. We want to thank the people who did reach out to us last week as well. We hope today's show is better for you because of the suggestions that you made. We did try to at least take them into consideration, but, maybe the ego just doesn't allow it. I'm not sure. You guys will have to tell us, I suppose. But thank you for listening to Pulse of the Pack.
Pulse of the Pack podcast.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or nonprofit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Cards.
If the Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
Go to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.